For most of the year, Mount Everest is sealed off by the jet stream. Winds so violent the summit might as well be another planet. But every spring the jet stream shifts just enough, just long enough for people to try. And in 2025, that shift didn't open a week-long door. It opened a crack. A handful of usable days, weather windows measured in hours, and one rush that turned the upper mountain into a one-lane staircase in the sky. Because on Everest, time isn't just time. Time is oxygen, time is heat, time is your brain working or not. By the end of May, Nepal had issued 468 permits to foreign climbers on Everest, and that number doesn't even count the Sherpas, guides, rope-fitting teams, and support staff who make those summit attempts possible. Once the weather breaks open, the route becomes a moving city made of headlamps and breath. Here's the trap. You spend weeks acclimating. You spend tens of thousands of dollars. You suffer for one chance. So, when the forecast finally gives a window, everyone goes. And when everyone goes, Everest stops being a mountain and becomes a system. A system with choke points, a system with lines, a system that forces you to wait at the worst altitude on Earth. In 2025, the biggest summit surge came on May 18th and May 19th, 2 days where hundreds of climbers and guides jammed the route. But the danger didn't begin on those 2 days. It began right before the rush, when two climbers on the same expedition reached the highest camps, and one of them never walked out of his tent. Philip P.J. Santiago II was a 45-year-old climber from the Philippines. Like everyone else at that stage, he had paid his price in time and pain just to reach the South Col Camp 4, around 8,000 meters, where the death zone truly starts. Up there, your body doesn't recover, it spends. It spends warmth, it spends judgment, it spends the ability to do simple things. At sea level, you get tired and rest fixes it. Up there, fatigue is a warning light that doesn't turn off. According to Nepal's tourism officials, PJ reached Camp 4, rested in his tent, and later that night, he died there. No dramatic fall on camera, no sudden storm ripping the camp apart. Just the death zone doing what it does best, turning exhaustion into a countdown. And here's what's brutal about Everest. When someone dies at Camp 4, the mountain doesn't pause. The window is coming, the lines are forming, and the next wave of climbers is already climbing toward the same camp. That's the deal everyone makes without saying it out loud. When the crack in the jet stream opens, the route keeps moving, even when someone doesn't. Now at almost the same moment, another climber from the same organizing company was still in motion. Subhatra Ghosh was 45 years old from India. And unlike the stereotypes people love to throw around online, he wasn't some clueless tourist wandering into the death zone with blind confidence. He had prior climbs, he had training. He was a school teacher, yes, but also a mountaineer who'd built a resume over time. And still, Everest doesn't care. He reached the summit, and then he entered the part of the climb that kills most people, the descent. Some people think the danger ends at the summit. Like once you touch the top, you're basically safe. That's backwards. The summit is the moment you discover what you really spent to get there, because now you're exhausted, your oxygen is lower, your hands are slower, your brain is foggier, and the route that was hard on the way up becomes lethal on the way down. Subrata died below the Hillary Step while descending after summiting. And one detail reported by Reuters became the center of immediate controversy. The expedition organizer said Subrata refused to descend from below the Hillary Step. That one line raises 1,000 questions, because refuse to descend up there doesn't always mean what it means down here. It can mean confusion. It can mean oxygen deprivation. It can mean your brain no longer processes risk correctly. It can mean you can't see, can't coordinate, can't make sense of what you're being told. It can mean the mountain already took your decision making and your body just hasn't caught up yet. Now, zoom out, because Subrata's final hours don't make sense unless you understand what Everest looked like in 2025. When the winds are stable and the weather window is wide, teams can stagger their pushes. The mountain breathes. There's still danger, but there's space. In 2025, the weather didn't give space. It gave short windows. And short windows do one thing every single time. They concentrate risk. Instead of 7 days of summit bids, you get 2. Instead of a steady stream, you get a surge. Instead of movement, you get lines. And lines are deadly at 8,000 meters for one reason. Standing still is not neutral. Standing still is losing. Your body burns oxygen just to exist. The cold drains heat through every layer. The simplest tasks, clipping a carabiner, adjusting a strap, take longer than they should. Not because you're stupid, because your brain is running on fumes. And when the line stops working, the clock doesn't stop with it. A guide described reaching Camp 3 during the summit rush and seeing around 800 people there. Then the climb toward Camp 4 became so crowded that a section that should take 8 hours took 11. Think about what that means. 11 hours at altitude, 11 hours of oxygen consumption, 11 hours of dehydration, 11 hours of heat loss. And that's before your summit day even begins. That same guide said that as they left Camp 4 to start their push, they passed the body of Santiago. Think about that. The summit window was so tight and the system so crowded that climbers were stepping into the line, moving upward into the dark, while passing someone who had died at the very camp they were departing. That's not a movie. That's the reality of how Everest works when the weather compresses everyone into the same corridor. And it sets the stage for what happened to Subrata. Because once you're caught in the upper mountain traffic, you don't have unlimited options. You can't just sprint past people. You can't always turn around immediately. You can't always descend faster than the climbers below you. You're inside a system, and that system punishes delays. Most experienced teams live by a simple rule. Turn around early enough that you won't be forced to descend in darkness, wind, and exhaustion. People often call it a 2 o'clock rule, a hard line where if you're not on the summit by a certain time, you turn around. Not because reaching the top isn't important, but because the descent is where the mountain collects payment. Now, put yourself in Subrata's position on a day like May 18th or May 19th. You've trained, you've paid, you've waited weeks for this exact crack in the jet stream. You're near the top of the world, but the wind is up, the route is jammed, the line is crawling, and your oxygen is not infinite. What do? Here's the ugly answer. A lot of people make the same choice. They push anyway, not because they're reckless villains, because the psychology of Everest is brutal. You don't just climb up a mountain, you climb while your brain keeps whispering, this is your only chance. And the moment you accept that whisper, you start spending margin. Margin is the entire game on Everest. Margin of oxygen, margin of daylight, margin of strength, margin of judgment. Once you spend it, you don't get it back. And when you're descending from the summit ridge, below the Hillary Step, there is no comfort waiting for you. There is only more mountain, more exposure, more hours before safety. This is why queues are so dangerous. They don't just slow you down, they steal your descent. And the descent is already happening inside a body that's breaking down. Subrata didn't die on the way up, he died after he made it. And that's the part people hate accepting, because it destroys the fantasy. Reaching the summit doesn't mean you won. It means you're now gambling the last of your energy on the only part that matters, getting down. According to Reuters, the organizer said Subrata refused to descend from below the Hillary Step. Recovery efforts were discussed. The cause of death would be determined later. That's all we can say with certainty from public reporting. But anyone who understands high altitude understands the pattern behind the words. At that elevation, once a climber becomes too weak or too impaired to keep moving, rescue becomes brutally difficult. Not because people don't care, because helping at that altitude can cost more lives. And this is the hardest truth Everest forces on everyone who climbs it. Sometimes the only survivable decision for the people around you is to keep moving. That sounds cold. It sounds inhuman, but the death zone punishes anyone who stops. Even strong climbers can't carry a fully grown person down technical terrain while their own brain is failing and their own oxygen is dropping. Even guides who have saved lives before can reach a point where the mountain is telling them clearly that if they stop now, 2 people will die instead of 1. That's not weakness. That's physics. That's altitude. And in 2025, the entire system pushed people toward those impossible moments because short weather windows concentrated crowds. Crowds created delays, and delays erased margin. By the end of the season, deaths on Everest were reported to be lower than 2024 and far lower than 2023, but the danger didn't vanish. It concentrated. Outside reported 5 deaths on the Nepal side in 2025, with 3 occurring high on the mountain above base camp, including Santiago at Camp 4 and Subrata below the Hillary Step. And if you strip away the social media arguments, the politics, the hot takes about permits, what remains is the same simple truth that has always defined Everest. The mountain is not impressed by your dream. It doesn't care what you paid. It doesn't care who you are at home. It doesn't care that you trained. It doesn't care that you waited. It only cares if you still have margin when the line stops moving. PJ Santiago died at the South Col before he ever got his summit day. Subrata Ghosh died below the Hillary Step after he reached the top. 2 climbers, 1 mountain, same season. And the same lesson Everest repeats every year, louder than any celebration on the summit. The summit is optional. The descent is mandatory.